described and captioned media program. In the classroom and on the go. dcmp.org.
Learning Seed Company presents Sexual Harassment at School, student video. A girl walks down a high school hallway.
A remark someone makes.
A boy strokes her arm.
An unwanted touch. Or pressure to do something you don't want to do. It can be scary and make you feel horrible, like your whole world is thrown out of focus. Sexual harassment takes many forms, and those responsible for it can be people you know, your classmates, teachers, people you'd least expect. Sexual harassment happens in school more often than you think. Perhaps it's even happened to you.
Title: Sexual Harassment at School, Hostile Environments.
This video is about sexual harassment in your world, school. In this program, you will learn to recognize behaviors and situations that could be sexual harassment. You will become familiar with how to handle harassing situations, the different kinds of sexual harassment, and how to cope after harassment occurs. You will also understand how to avoid becoming the harasser. By learning to identify and handle sexual harassment, you will put this destructive behavior in focus.
3 boys surround a girl sitting in a hall reading. Title: What is sexual harassment?
Sexual harassment is an unwanted, sex-related advance that makes a person feel uncomfortable and unsafe. It can be a request for sexual favors or unwelcome passes that intimidate, violate, cause fear and confusion. It can happen to girls or boys. It can be done by boys or girls. If sexual harassment is not the same as flirting or joking around, then what is it?
A boy and girl stand back to back with their arms crossed. Title: Types of sexual harassment.
Sexual harassment can be experienced 3 different ways: verbally, physically, and visually.
I had this teacher, and he would just look at me in the wrong way, and he would smirk at me. It wasn't like a casual smile, it was more like a creepy grin, and it just made me feel really uncomfortable. And he would just put his arm around my shoulder, and it wasn't a good situation for me to be in, actually, at school. I just felt like my ability to learn was being hindered.
Sexual harassment is very common in schools. There was a study done
Counselor Katie
at the
Kamen.
University of Michigan, and they found that 1 in 3 students from middle school and high school are sexually harassed.
The described and captioned media program provides services designed to benefit students who are blind, visually impaired, deaf, hard of hearing, and deafblind. These services include a library of free loan described and captioned educational media, a clearinghouse of information related to educational media access, a gateway to internet resources related to accessibility, and a set of guidelines for adding descriptions and captions to media. There are no use.
Hi, I'm Savia Yana, and you're watching VTEL TV. The COVID-19 pandemic has led to a dramatic loss of human life worldwide and presents an unprecedented challenge to public health, food system, and world of work. The economic and social disruption caused by the pandemic is devastating. Tens of millions of people are at risk of falling into extreme poverty, while the number of undernourished people currently estimated at nearly 690 million could increase up to 132 million by the end of the year. Millions of enterprises face an existential threat. Nearly half of the world's 3.3 billion global workforce are at risk of losing their livelihoods. In formal economy, workers are particularly vulnerable because the majority lack social protection and access to quality healthcare, and have lost access to productive assets. Without the means to earn income during the lockdowns, many are unable to feed themselves and their families. For most, no income means no food, or at best, less food and less nutritious food. The pandemic has been affecting the entire food system and has laid bare its fragility. Border closures, trade restrictions, and confinement measures have been preventing farmers from accessing markets, including the buying inputs and selling their produce, and agricultural workers from harvesting crops, thus disrupting domestic and international food supply chains and reducing access to health and safety, diverse diets. The pandemic has decimated jobs, placed millions of livelihoods at risk. As breadwinners lose jobs, fall ill, and die, the food security and nutrition of millions of women and men are under threat. With these low-income countries, particularly the most marginalized populations, which include small-scale farmers and indigenous peoples, being hit hardest. Millions of agricultural workers, wage and self-employed, while feeding the world, regularly face high levels of working poverty, malnutrition, and poor health, and suffer from lack of safety, labor protection, as well as other types of abuse. With low and irregular incomes and lack of social support, many of them are spurred to continue working, often in unsafe conditions, thus exposing themselves and their families to additional risks. Further, when experiencing income losses, they may resort to negative coping strategies, such as distressed sale of assets, predatory loans, or child labor. Migrant agricultural workers are particularly vulnerable because they face risks in their transport, working, and living conditions, and struggle to access support measures put in place by governments, guaranteeing the safety and health of all agri-food workers, from primary producers to those involved in food processing, transport, and retail, including street food vendors, as well as better incomes and protection, will be critical to saving lives and protecting public health, people's livelihoods, and food security. In the COVID-19 crisis, food security, public health, and employment and labor issues, in particular workers' health and safety, converge. Adhering to workplace safety and health practices and ensuring access to decent work and the protection of labor rights in all industries will be crucial in addressing the human dimension of crisis. Immediate and purposeful action to save lives and livelihoods should include extending social protection towards universal health coverage and income support for those most affected. These include workers in the informal economy and poorly protected and low-paid jobs, including youth, older workers, and migrants. Particular attention must be paid to the situation of women who are overrepresented in a low-paid job and care roles. Different forms of support are key, including cash transfer, child allowances, and healthy school meals, shelter and food relief initiatives, support for employment retention, and recovery and financial relief for businesses, including micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises. In designing and implementing such measures, it is essential that governments work closely with employees and workers. Countries dealing with existing humanitarian crisis or emergencies are particularly exposed to the effects of COVID-19. Responding swiftly into the pandemic will ensure that humanitarian and recovery assistance reaches the most in need is critical. Now is the time for global solidarity and support, especially with those most vulnerable in our societies, particularly in the emerging developing world. Only together we can overcome the intertwined health and social and economic impacts of the pandemic and prevent its escalation into a protracted humanitarian and food security catastrophe, with the potential of loss as already achieved developmental gains. We must rethink the future of our environment and tackle climate change and environmental degradation with ambition and urgency. Only then we can protect the health, livelihoods, food security, and nutrition of all people and ensure that our new normal is a better one. Thank you for watching VTEL TV.